Laverne Cox has said, "We are not what other people say we are. We are who we know ourselves to be." Welcome to all who are present, whether in our building or on Zoom. I am Kathleen Brannan. My pronouns are she and her. We have noted that in times of disequilibrium, whether personal or communal, it's important to remind ourselves of the need to extend grace to one another in our conversations and emails and in our collaborative work at All Souls. There's a framework handed down from the Sufi mystic tradition called the 4 gates of speech, and perhaps is a good reminder for each of us and can serve as a guideline in our spoken and written words. The first gate, is it true? The second gate, is it necessary? The third gate, is it kind? And the fourth gate, is it the right time? So may each of us extend grace and receive grace in this community. So this morning, we have a special guest. We welcome and extend grace to Reverend Teri Schwartz, who will lead our service today. Reverend Teri is a UU minister and the founder of Spirit+Strategy, a pastoral counseling, coaching, and consulting practice, and currently serves as the worship minister for the Juneau UU Fellowship. Formerly, she served as senior co-minister of First Unitarian Church in Chicago, along with her husband and colleague, Reverend David Schwartz. As a clergy couple and partners in crime, the Schwartzes mostly stay out of trouble by staying in church. Teri is a graduate of Harvard Divinity School and Brown University. She has formerly served as a chaplain in hospitals, palliative care, hospice, and 2 UU seminarians. She's neurodivergent and lives with chronic medical conditions and disabilities that have shaped her spirit but not defined her. She lives in Longmont with David, their 2 kids, ages 16 and 13, and a giant 170-pound St. Bernard dog. But as she noticed, and most families would agree, it's really their 3 cats that run the household.
Good morning. Can y'all hear me in the back? Good, okay. I'm the Reverend Teri Schwartz, and my pronouns are she, her. And it is an honor and delight to join you this morning. Thank you for extending that grace to me and to my colleague, your minister, Reverend Ron. The good people here at All Souls, and that's all of you, whether you're here for the first time or the 1,000th time, are rooted in a community of love, a work to fulfill their mission, to cultivate compassion, to foster spiritual connection, and enact transformative justice to heal ourselves and the world. I am joined this morning by our elementalists, June and Ren. Thank you so much for your service today. We look everywhere for wisdom and a good word. Sometimes that comes from the scriptures of the world, sometimes contemporary poetry, and sometimes from YouTube. Whether from 2,000 years ago or 2 hours ago, from ancient scrolls to pixels on a screen in our hand, storytelling can deepen our sense of meaning, of belonging, of empathy, and of connection to our common humanity. It's what we do in worship, and it's the mission of Story District. Story District is an organization in Washington, D.C. They teach storytelling to inspire, connect, and build a community of diverse voices in our nation's capital and beyond, where it is needed. Every year for Pride Month, they host a special storytelling show called Outspoken. We'll hear highlights from Rebecca Kling's story from Outspoken in 2017.
July 2009. I'm in Chicago, headed downtown on the train for my appointment at the Daly Center to at long last legally change my name from my old male name to a new female name. And honestly, the hearing takes about that long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, during which the judge directs more sirs at me than seems strictly necessary. But I know to pick my battles. 2 months and $526 after first filing my petition for name change, I am legally and duly recognized Rebecca Kling. So I go down to go across the street to the DMV, and getting a new corrected license is actually pretty easy. $5 and a copy of that certified paperwork. But when I ask about changing the gender marker from an M to an F, I'm told I need a note from a doctor. But it reminded me how much it can hurt to not have documentation that matches who you are, how difficult it can be to move through the world. And something occurs to me. Summer of 2009, I've been getting ma'amed more and more. I've been getting sirred less and less. I've been getting ladiesed when out with friends or using the women's dressing room at stores without a problem. And what if I go to a different DMV and tell a little white lie? It's not just me being stubborn. Okay, well, it's a little bit me being stubborn. But it's also that difficulty of moving through the world, of getting pulled over and fearing a roadside referendum on my gender and just being able to hand the officer my license. It's the difference of having that interaction with a bouncer or just walking into a bar. It's the difference of fearing that the TSA is going to catch me trying to smuggle a penis through airport security and just catching my flight. I head to another DMV. And my number is called, and I go up to a little old lady at the counter, and I say, "Hi, I was just at the DMV downtown, and there was a mistake somehow, and it says M on my license, and that doesn't make any sense." And she looks at me, and she looks at my license, and she looks at me, and she says, "Well, let's get that taken care of." The gods of bureaucracy are smiling on me. And I'm sure that some of that had to do with the privilege of the color of my skin and the way that I speak and being able to connect with that little old lady at the DMV, but in the moment, all I can do is stand there and nod. And she types away, humming and looking at her screen, and I am convinced that she can see right through me, that the screen is displaying my old name, displaying my old photo, displaying all of my lies and subterfuge, but I make it. And she hands me a sheet of paper saying, "Take that to the clerk. It was our mistake, so they won't charge you, but they'll need to sign off on it." And she sends me on my way. And in the moment, I am convinced that I have pulled the wool over this woman's eyes, that I have fooled the DMV, and that I have gotten away with something amazing. But since then, I've reconsidered. What if she knew everything? What if my old name, my old photo, my old license, and my old gender was on that screen for her to see, and she helped me out anyway? It is really easy to come up with a list of people who have not had my back, of bouncers, and police officers and judges and people sitting in the Oval Office. But what if there's another list? A list that I don't get to see but still exists, of people who have had my back even when I didn't know it.
As we light our chalice, may we recommit ourselves to being the kind of people that have one another's backs and have the backs of the most vulnerable in our society. Breathe with me. We give thanks. We give thanks to the grace that weaves our world. We give thanks to our ancestors and the ancestors of this land and all the beings that make and are made by this land. We bid welcome and thanks to all of those co-creating this spiritual vessel. An old word is liturgy, the work of the people for worship. Those present with us, including the sensed and the unsensed, and all those who come after, we are connected through time. And may our time here and now be rooted in love and expressed in shared values, even if differing opinions. May it yield something nourishing, beneficial, and connective. This is our collective intent. We ask grace to hear our prayer as the hope of all of us gathered.
Do you know what today is? It is time for our monthly installment of Foundations of Faith, which is about UU history. Who's excited? Yeah. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Theodore Parker. Does anybody know who Theodore Parker is? Quinn, who's Theodore Parker?
Is it a chipmunk?
Is it a chipmunk? No, it's not a chipmunk. Addie, do you have a thought?
Is it Spider-Man?
Spider-Man. No, that's Peter Parker. So, yeah, this is Theodore Parker, who was not Theodore the Chipmunk and not Peter Parker, who was Spider-Man, but he was a Unitarian minister in the 1850s. Thought everyone is important and thought everyone should feel included. So he was a great speaker and writer and used his words to inspire people to fight for justice. He spoke out against slavery, saying that everyone deserved to be free, and also believed that men and women should have equal rights. So one day, he was writing a sermon for his church, and he was thinking about the language, the words that he used, and how we often would use words like mankind or brotherhood, and realized that those words left people out. Because what about women? And what about people who didn't feel like either of those words fit them at all? So Theodore decided that he needed to make a change, and he started saying humanity instead of mankind, and the human family instead of brotherhood, and also started referring to God as both father and mother, which was a big deal back then because most people just thought of God mostly as God the Father. So by using words like mother as well as father to talk about God, helped start a new tradition in Unitarian churches of using language that to try to make everyone feel included and welcome. And some of his friends thought this was silly, and they said, why does it matter? People know what we mean. But Theodore believed that his words were powerful. And he thought that if we use words to include everyone, it could help people feel respected and loved. And many years after he died, the Unitarian Universalists followed this example, and in 1989, they made a change, updating the UU principles to words like person and their, so everyone, no matter their gender, could feel included. So today we're still working on this as UUs, right? We're still working to perfect our language, and we know that some people don't like he or she to describe themselves, so we use sometimes they or maybe other pronouns to make everyone feel seen and who they are. And we keep trying to make the words we use better because kindness and inclusion are important to us. So, Theodore Parker once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." So, making the world fairer takes time, but every step we take can help us get there. And when we use words that include everyone, we're hopefully bending the arc towards justice. So, yeah, if all the kids want to come follow me downstairs, the youth are still meeting back in Ron's office, and the younger kids are going to go downstairs with me.
Last spring, the All Souls Board approved a practice of splitting our offering plate every Sunday. In keeping with our mission, our purpose, our calling, we are pleased to be able to partner with organizations whose values dovetail with our own. This month, we are sharing the collection plate with the American Red Cross. The American Red Cross supports disaster relief to individuals in the form of emergency shelter, food, blankets, clothing, water, meals, showers, internet access, phone charging, and other emergency services. The response to Hurricanes Milton and Helene have been an enormous undertaking and will continue for months. All Souls will direct our contributions to support hurricane relief from our plate sharing for the month of November, which means we will donate half the cash or checks we collect during all of the services this month to the American Red Cross. If you wish to make an online donation, be sure to select Share the Plate from the drop-down menu. If texting, and the number is it on the slide? It was on the slide. Indicate the dollar amount plus share if it is for the collection plate. If your collection plate donation is a pledge payment, just write pledge on the donation envelope or the memo line on your check, and we'll apply your donation toward your pledge instead of the share. The offering will now be gratefully received, and thank you for your generosity.
This week marks Transgender Awareness Week, and Wednesday, November 20th, is Transgender Day of Remembrance. For the last 25 years, it is a day to remember and honor trans people who have been killed for simply being who they are. In the last 12 months, 309 trans people were violently killed, 113 of those in the United States, and a disproportionate amount of victims were people of color. You know this all too well. 2 years ago, 6 minutes of terror, a gunman murdered 5 people, 25 people injured, the community terrorized. The shots of the Club Q shooting reverberated through the country, yet another reminder to trans people and those who love them: you are not safe. You are not safe for being who you are. You can be killed for existing. You did what a church should do. You opened your doors. You opened them wide. 700 people gathered in vigil, shock, fear, and grief and lamentation. So far in 2024, that's just since January, 45 anti-trans legislative bills have passed, limiting the health and human rights of trans people and further fueling the othering that at its most extreme becomes hatred, and hatred can become murder. Make no mistake, these legislative issues are life and death issues too. They are cloaked in the guise of rational law and increasingly less civil discourse, more pervasive and insidious than gunshots and no less deadly. Baudelaire said the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world he didn't exist. I charge you to do what a church should do. Remember your name, All Souls. That's All Souls. Remember, grieve, act for justice. Home is a body where you get to be you, no strings attached. Home, a house of faith, is where you get to be you, the body of the church, no strings attached. And may this house of worship, this house of humanity, be such a home.
The puppeteers string me up.
My elbows jump.
My wrists hang limp in the air. I'm everything they want me to be.
A girl.
A boy.
Lovely to look at in my black dress.
So handsome in my button-up.
Tights.
Khaki pants.
Purple church shoes with a tiny kitten heel.
Sneakers caked in dirt after sliding at home base. I'm so good at playing the part.
To be girl is to obey. To be soft ceramic tea kettle heavy over wispy blue flames. To be girl is to boil over and evaporate in the same breath. To love and to be loved silently.
To be boy is to get my way. To be a train boring through mountains, tracks paving my manifest destiny. To stand up straight with my hand up first. To be gendered is to answer every question before it is asked.
To ask no questions.
I follow my cues. I say all the right lines.
My body is a hollow instrument carved from broken branches.
Strings wrapped around my lungs, breathing in spite of me.
The puppeteer speaks and my mouth jerks open.
I speak only when I am spoken for. Words coerced but called a gift. Control masked as mimicry.
Shadow of a gender I wish I didn't have to be. It's just so easy to let someone else do the talking.
Obedience is a safer body than mine. His movements are my movements. Run fast.
Walk with back straight.
Legs spread while seated, as if I were just the image in the mirror. And I let it happen. I learned by watching.
Another thread fastening me to womanhood.
Mimicking that which I must perform.
I let my body be sculpted into caricature.
Each tug of the strings bringing a twinge of pain.
I can be a real girl and do what I'm told.
I can be a real boy if it means survival. But when I look in the mirror, I cannot tell if it is my reflection or someone else's.
Gender is a puppet show.
It's ventriloquism, whatever it takes to fool you, and there is no easy escape. Each time you call me he, boy,
she, girl,
I feel you tug the strings. Baggy costumes letting my body escape me.
But I am learning how to become.
How to fight through dysphoria and disobey.
To untangle this body from the girl I was woven into.
Unbuoy my joints from whittled blocks. I snapped the strings that have held me safe but sorry.
They snap back and leave tally mark bruises won for every time I let femininity be replaced by whatever it is I've escaped to. Change isn't easy when instruction has become reflex.
Performance, a nervous habit, the kind that makes my bones stiff.
Not a body.
But a doll on a string. I swallowed the graceful hand of God so that I might breathe this body whole. This is my resurrection. This is magic. This is truth. This is the only way I know how to be. I wish my body didn't need a gender.
I wish I didn't have to be a real boy.
Or a real girl. I wish I didn't have to be real to be allowed to exist.
My body is still far from any kind of home.
It still hurts to breathe too deeply.
To be whole but not yet holy.
Home is a body where you get to be you. No strings attached. Have you ever felt that? Have you?
Gender is a stage.
And we are all fastened to it. Don't be surprised when we break free.
They were excited to visit the DMV. They couldn't sleep and left home at 4:24 in the morning so they could be the first person inside when the doors opened 3 hours later. They were about to become the first person in the country to receive the city's new gender-neutral driver's license, which designates genders by male, female, or X. And 3 hours later, they received their accurate ID. They said, "It's important to me because it means knowing that I am valid and not erased." That's the story of Shige Sakurai, who doesn't identify with a specific gender. Sakurai uses the pronouns they and them. That was 2017. When the District of Columbia became the first jurisdiction in the country to offer non-binary driver's licenses and ID cards. Now, 6 years later, nearly half of US states allow people to have an accurate ID. At the federal level, not all documents yet permit gender-neutral or non-binary markers on passports and some federal documents. In 2021, Sakurai told the American Civil Liberties Union, "I believe I have a legal and human right to access accurate ID documents." This is not merely a bureaucratic issue. This can be a life or death issue. Sakurai says they've experienced street harassment and physical assault because of being non-binary. They said, I've also seen editorials written to demean me and horrifying comments on news articles saying that non-binary people should be sent to a guillotine or gas chamber. All of these acts of violence seek to erase me, and I do not need the federal government erasing me too. Shige Sakurai is the Reverend Shige Sakurai, Director of Equity, Belonging, and Change at the UUA, our denominational headquarters. Our concept that there are only two genders is simply a matter of our culture and moment in history. Cultures throughout time and around the world have had some form, often, of a third gender, often who have special roles in society. Sometimes that third gender is a fixed identity. Sometimes that third gender is a larger umbrella for a category of fluid identities. In Samoa, there are the Fa Afafin. In Muslim Indian societies, there are the Hijiras. In the Ottoman Empire, there were the Cossack. In Oaxaca, Mexico, there are the Mujes and Zapotec culture. In numerous American indigenous cultures, there are two-spirited people. In Thailand, the Cathaways. In Indonesia, the Warriors. In indigenous Hawaiian culture, a third gender is the Mahus. And increasingly in US culture, genderqueer identities. In Sulawesi, Indonesia, there are 5 genders. Sometimes our culture gets things wrong, really wrong. In the 1950s, our culture was telling Black girls they couldn't go to integrated schools, let alone fly spaceships. Then along comes Mae Jemison. Our culture did not have a category for a Black woman astronaut until Mae Jemison launched into space in 1992 as a mission specialist aboard the space shuttle Endeavour. As a little girl, Jemison watched the Apollo airings on TV, and she was upset that there were no female astronauts. Jemison was inspired by African-American actress Nichelle Nichols on Star Trek, and she was determined to travel to space. Our culture was wrong, and it had to change, and it still has to. So here's the TLDR about gender theory. You can get a doctorate and probably 10 of them in this field, but for our purposes, here's the executive summary. And TLDR, if you're not in the interwebs, too long, didn't read. There are more than 2 genders. 2. You cannot tell a person's gender by looking at them. Only a person can tell their own gender. It's an internal sense of identity. And a person's gender may or may not correspond to the body they were born with. The trouble is, in English, we use gendered pronouns to refer to other people, and language often constructs societal norms. She, him, hers, his. And typically, we have used they, them for third person plural, or the third person singular when the gender of the subject is unknown. But more and more people are using they, them pronouns. Because the idea that there is only male or female, this or that, one or the other, isn't any truer than the old idea that a Black woman could not be an astronaut. For my fellow grammar enthusiasts out there, I feel you. And when I first started wrapping my head around this concept, and it was actually an intern of mine who was a stand-up colleague, it felt a little odd landing on the ear, and it took a little practice. Yes, we can use they, them, and be grammatically correct. If it sounds different to you, you'll get accustomed to it. A linguist on NPR assured the listening audience some time ago that third-person singular use of they, them is okay because language changes all the time. And church needs to change too. So why? Why do pronouns matter? Is it really that big of a deal? Some people prefer they, them pronouns because they aren't a single or specific gender. Go back with me a few decades. This is like using Ms. because a person doesn't think their marital status should be a relevant issue. Y'all came through that. Remember the days when he was universal language for all people, but it actually wasn't and isn't? Because those were the days where to get birth control or a credit card required your husband's approval, and you couldn't wear pants. Let us not go back. Gender identity is on the inside, and it doesn't always correlate to the body we're born into. So if we guess someone's pronouns rather than ask or offer our own, we make an assumption based on how someone looks to us. When we do this, we assume. Remember that old saw? You make, When we assume someone's gender by guessing their pronoun, we are telling them implicitly, you have to look a certain way for us to believe you are who you are. We're telling them, if you don't fit my idea of how a man should look, dress, or act, or how a woman should look, dress, or act, you are other. You're wrong somehow. Gender nonconforming people get a lot of personal questions and scrutiny, sometimes at the risk of their safety. But sometimes we might be curious about all sorts of things. And we could be very well-intentioned. So I have Teri's rule. If you have a question and a curiosity and you're not sure you should ask a non-binary person, I want you to run a little test. Would you ask Grandma at Thanksgiving? If you wouldn't ask Grandma at Thanksgiving, it is probably not a good question to ask someone who is gender nonconforming. Grandma, after you pass the potatoes, are you really sure you're a woman? I mean, how do you know? Don't you think it's a phase? You don't need to know if she wears skirts more often than pants, whether she likes her hair long or short, the gender of the people she's been attracted to, her partners, nor the constellation of her genitals. You simply call her by the name she likes. Grandma, Nana, Nona, Jane, Catherine, whatever she wants. It sounds really complex, but at the end of the day, it's not. Just call a person by the pronoun they want, just like you call them by the name they want. I've heard it said, but I'm not comfortable, and these are churches I hear this in, I'm not comfortable using she for so-and-so. I'm going to tell you a big secret. In sanctuaries and in the world, it's not about you. You can't know someone's gender by looking at them. But more importantly, it's about treating one another with respect. It's the platinum rule. Treat someone not as you wish to be treated, but as they wish to be treated. So sometimes people wonder, why should we all share our preferred pronouns? Can't you just tell by looking at me? Well, we'll go back to the gender theory. No, gender can only be known on the inside. So no matter who you think I am, my gender, only I can know. It lets everyone share their pronouns, and when everyone shares their pronouns, it doesn't other or out anyone. When everyone shares their pronouns, especially on name tags, it reduces the scrutiny for someone whose appearance may look different than we were taught to expect. It also signals you're a safe person to talk to. And it ensures that everyone feels respected and welcome. It's about treating one another with respect, inherent worth and dignity, about living up to our communities, to our commitments and community as Unitarian Universalists. And not just meaning it and thinking about it, but living it. Keeping pace with it, because culture doesn't stand still. Language always changes, and culture has already moved on. 2 million American adults identify as non-binary. 13.7 million kids identify as non-binary, and you get to decide if they will feel welcome here. It means you get the chance to decide which list you'll be on. The list of bouncers, police officers, judges, and former presidents, again, who don't have the backs of trans and non-binary people, or the invisible list that does have the backs of trans and non-binary people. Culture changes, language changes, and thank goodness, because we needed Mae Jemison on that space shuttle endeavor, and she needed to fly that ship. And moreover, Mae Jemison needed a world where she could live her potential and achieve her determined dreams. And more than that, where a Black little girl on the south side of Chicago and everywhere can be guaranteed access to a high-quality education and public investment to follow her stars. To be the church of today and a church for tomorrow, we need to grow and change too. About those driver's licenses with forced male and female genders, Sakurai said, "I didn't previously feel like I had a choice. It's been in my mind for 14 years that this can be possible." And it is. If of all things the government can be progressive, hopefully it can continue to be progressive, then as a liberal church committed to the inherent worth and dignity of all people, we can do even better. And in the times that we're in, you have work to do. A pronoun at a time, not the end of our work, but a word, a step as we walk together. May grace guide our feet. May it be so, and amen. May the sacred time we created together nourish us, connect us to one another and to the world outside of the stained glass too, and sustain us this week. And let us go knowing we are not what other people say we are. We are who we know ourselves to be. You know who you are, and know this: you are all souls and you are beloved. Go in peace, and let us go singing.
God